Good morning, everyone. Nice to see all of you here today at the second day of Huddle Global. We have a very interesting panel and discussion in front of us the next 30 minutes, as I can see on our counter. So we're already on to the counter. So without much ado, let me just set stage by pointing to the heat map that you see behind this, just so that we set the stage. On the x-axis of this, you see the entire value chain of the ESDM ecosystem, global, starting from design all the way to a product that needs to be sold, manufactured, and supported through its life. And on the y-axis, you see the most important product segments that comprise of this industry, starting from smartphones to other compute products like laptops and servers, and very specific industry-specific products, whether it's automotive, aerospace. All of these require the entire value chain to come together for that to be realized. And the colors on the page represent the current readiness or the current maturity of the Indian ecosystem to be doing this and be globally competitive. And I stress on that point of being globally competitive. You can see a lot of greens towards the right side, which is more onto the product assembly test ecosystem. That's been through the success that we've had as a country over the past 5 to 10 years in manufacturing, largely led by consumer products and mobile smartphone products. But that's not just the story of India. India has a lot more to offer and a lot more product segments. Each of these requires consistent action from the entire ecosystem, which comprises of the companies, government, academia, all to come together to create a competitiveness in our ecosystem that can help India then deliver on that at a global stage. And today, we have represented in my panel here the design ecosystem, the manufacturing ecosystem, and also the talent and capability building side of it from academia. So I hope to have, from these experienced guests on our panel today, deeper insight in terms of what have we achieved, where are we leading, and what's the strategy for a state like Kerala, and what's the lesson that companies here, startups here can take in terms of moving forward. So I'll kick off today's panel by inviting opening remarks from each of my panelists. We've definitely come a long way. Definitely come a long way from where we were perhaps in the beginning of the last decade. So I'll start with Prince, you on the side. What has been, in your opinion, the most striking thing about the last decade that we've passed? And is there anything, one thing that you would bring up to say that something could have been different?
Good morning, everyone. I think that heat map was a real revelation of the state of the industry. It's also very informative in depicting the full industry in one single snapshot. We were actually thinking about talking about that quite a bit. I was listening to Arjun a few minutes back. He studied in Chenganur Engineering College. I am from Chenganur. When I started engineering, there was no engineering college there in Chenganur. And I could relate to many things that he said. That was pretty inspiring. But being a core electrical and electronics engineer who went into the IT field and only came into manufacturing about 6 years back, I want to just recite my story itself, because when you started your courses, you're studying way back then, you're doing certain things in the lab with PCBs and whatnot, and then you completely forget about the hardware part of it, and you go into software and you build a career there. When you come back in and you come to Kerala, and I find out that I'm living in Cochin now, in my backyard is a company called Nest and SFO, and they do this kind of stuff. And I had a chance to go meet with them, and I see what they do in the factories there. I was amazed. And I think a lot of people in Kerala don't know what is the capability and what's the extent of work that is being done in our own, sister companies or things that we have done, we've got in our state. So when I walked into the facility, I was shocked, because it took me from the college days. It amalgamated everything that I learned through the IT journey that I've had. So software and hardware becoming one to create solutions for customers. That was a magical thing to see. So what I've seen is, though, in the days that I joined, the manufacturing facility was like an assembly line. It's a factory, and everybody has an image. And when you talk factory, you can see that it's a line of people, machines, and this is the imagery that you get. And it was largely that. But there was also a lot of other layers behind what a factory is. There is a lot of engineering, there's a lot of design parts, there's a lot of testing parts, there's a lot of other complexity that comes in. So one of the things that I thought I would bring in based on my experience was that, how can I make this whole factory a little different? How do you look at this factory going forward? What is industry doing in terms of the evolution of these factories itself? That's when the concepts like Industry 4.0, 5.0 now was all emerging. So when we started looking at setting up new facilities, the thought process was completely different. And one of the things that proved it was when COVID hit, people were forced to work from home, sit at home. But if you're working in a factory, there is no option of work from home. You had to go to the factory or the factory isn't running. And if the factory isn't running, no revenue is coming. The hit was too intense. And there were special exceptions given because the factories are producing components for healthcare, for aerospace, for industries that cannot do without any of this stuff. And at that time, it was 100% that all these people had to come to the factory. But you fast forward to now, it's just a few years. Today, if there's a lockdown, you don't need to have that sort of a scenario. 80% of the people can go home. 20% of the people are only needed. In some cases, even less, to run the entire factory and keep the production going. Of course, the whole supply chain, value chain story is a little different. But the way I see it, this is the thought process that all the manufacturing industries need to pick up on. Because as you're seeing, and today I think last couple of days, there's a lot of solutions being talked about, but it's all on the application AI layer. But what about on the ground, on the physical layer where it all translates into value? There also, there's a link that needs to be done. Intelligence needs to go down to that level, and that's when it really affects and changes our lives. So that's where I want to just start this off and pass it on.
No, thank you, Prince. I think it's very important how much those years of COVID really changed the understanding and also the way technology has gone into areas where earlier it was a lot more about people. So on that segue, let's go to our second panelist for his opening remarks. Naveen, how have you seen the last decade emerge from your point of view from the design side?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm from the fabless chip design side of things. And that's something not new to India. We have been doing it for 4 decades in India. And almost every design company in the world have engineering here, and any design that gets done in the world probably has an Indian footprint on it. So this has been a proven and a well-established industry. What's new in last 10 years, I would say, is that first, actually, a lot of people recognize that there is something called semiconductor, and it's foundational to everything that we do today. Right? So that acknowledgement is fresh and actually rewarding to ensure that we put everything through. The second one, I would say, is that while we had the design ecosystem, but we missed some of the other ecosystems in the world. So what we have seen in the last decade is building the foundations of everything that we need in the ecosystem, whether it's from materials to transistors, from instrumentation to packaging, testing, and big factories. We recognize that and started ensuring we create an ecosystem where we have the development, research, and the companies for IP, EDA, materials, factories, instrumentation, and all of that. And that's what is happening around us, right? And then you see that that's built by 4 Ps that we have focused on. The first P was definitely the policy that came in to ensure that there are incentives, there are rules and regulations, there are invitations and rewards, and there is a co-creation of the whole supply chain. The second one was that create the production nation. So how do you create the factories to produce this and then be able to supply to the world? Third one was the product nation. We were doing products for the world, but that how can we do something for ourselves, right? And then fourth was built on the people part of it. We were always the people nation to build the talent for the world. And I think all those 4 parts have been implemented to create the so-called as foundation of the semiconductor ecosystem. And now we have started building in which market segments from the heat map that you showed, I was counting, it said 10 into 23, so 230 boxes there. Which are the top 10 boxes that we need to mark and say that's where we need to be green is what's going on. So that's where we are, and I think looking forward to the journey
I think it's a great start in terms of, I think what I took from what you said is, we've completed our discovery phase. We now know what all are out there. Now we really need to look at where do we really focus, get better at, and where are those areas. And for that, it's very important that we really develop our people, the capabilities. And so I'll go to Dr. Alex next. How do you see the evolution of capability in India, and how the student community, which plays a very large part in moving towards onto the startups and the startup communities, how have you seen the last decade pan out?
Yeah, if you look at the education or the universities as such in the country, and also like in around the world, certain things have drastically changed, certain things haven't changed. And both of these are problems. Right? Things that have changed, like there is an increased focus on student-centric learning, where you put like the student at the center rather than the teacher. So that is a good thing. But then what is also being a problem is like the technological development, whether someone using AI or a ChatGPT. Right? Today, you would see teachers creating questions using AI, students solving the questions using the AI, and in the entire process, there is no human thinking, creativity, problem solving, all the things that you're supposed to do, it's not happening. And another thing, when we are talking about entrepreneurs coming out of campus, one would think, you train the students to be an entrepreneur. Now, across the curriculum, you will hardly see an engineer studying finance, an engineer studying like business. Now, that is a fundamental problem that, we have compartmentalized education to something specific. So, we had electrical engineering split into, communication, instrumentation, whatnot. There are hundreds of branches. But then there are also models which are very, very different around the world. Like, if you look at some of the universities, they have gone about removing the whole idea of specialization and keeping it Bachelor of Engineering, and focus on creativity, problem solving, and related stuff. Now, this is probably difficult to do in Indian context if you think about things being incremental. Unless like there is a surgical strike to actually change the system upside down, there is no way we'll be competitive in an international context.
No, thank you so much. I think we've set the stage now. Now let's get a little bit braver in terms of, I think we've been set a goal in terms of, as a panel here, discuss how do we go forward, how do we hit those grand goals that we need to hit. So we'll break into the segments of it. Let's start with the design ecosystem, the high value part of what we do, where we have this 44 decades of experience in terms of knowing what it is, the talent, etc. Now, as we move forward, there are so many areas here. And I know, Naveen, you're so passionate about the fabless ecosystem, IP creation, all of these. Could you touch upon, as we move forward, from being largely a service-oriented design centers, as we move into more IP-oriented, IP business models, licensing models, etc., where it becomes a combination of not just the engineering part of it, but your ability to influence and score design wins for those IPs, etc. Can you take our audience through what it means to not just design, but be able to take that design to market, take that design across the ecosystem, make it standardized, etc., and what kind of returns such development gives as opposed to doing services?
Sure. I think let's start with saying what the goal should be or what the outcome could be. And I'll maybe throw this that you can go and evaluate, pick the top 3 fabs in the semiconductor field, look at their revenue and the valuation. And then probably TSMC is where it is because of the, such a niche that they have created. But you go and look at a lot of other fabs and look at the multiplication factor and do the same with a fabless company, whether it is NVIDIA, Broadcom, Marvell, Qualcomm, MediaTek, AMD, all of that. And you'll see the difference that the valuation of comes from the IP, from the idea that you have built in. That's where the market respects the end product. Rest everything is enablers and in service of that. So if we have to go do that, there are two things that we need to do. Again, do a bottoms up and a tops down, right? Tops down is that look at those, you had 10 segments, and there was probably some things not there. But if we look at, let's say, Kerala as an example, space has such a big strength of this state, right? And not just the scientists, but the biggest operations and the projects have been done from here, or the scientists from here. If we deep down from there into saying what does the space tech, whether it's a public or a private and a mix of it, and the ecosystem around that needs, and break it down into what it needs into a product, and hence the different IP, the building blocks and the technology that we need to build. And probably we get a metrics of saying, like, 3 top level space and something, and then 30 or 50 something like that. And then pick from those IPs, starts creating from bottoms up that we can build into to fit into this thing. So that's the top down that we can come and build it. The bottoms up is because we have created the foundation to do everything from research to the big factories and the design ecosystem. We can also leverage what we call as the proliferation of all of these things we have done, and from the academia, as well as some of the startups, some of the differentiated IPs that I can bring in so that I can add value either in terms of a power performance area of the end product, or just by actually adding more features or functionalities to do that. And that's what is happening, if you see, is that there are a lot of the places where we are just seeing that these new IPs are being developed, which can go and fit it and replace or sometime be the new one. While a lot of other ideas are coming from tops down, that I break the product into 10 components and I'll build 3 versus I'll buy the rest 7 from there. So I think that is what needs to happen to quickly end up into a product or an SoC or a chip. That's what we want, and enable it into the ecosystem that we have been leveraging or is our strength.
So I'm going to ask you a follow-on. Now we've got a lot of young entrepreneurs who want to become part of this ecosystem, develop the IP. How do they discover the problems that the larger companies have, which their IPs can solve? How do we bring that discoverability that you spoke about the power performance features, etc. But how does a small company, how does a startup start to know as to what are the areas that if they focus on, because IP development takes its own timeline, right? By the time they develop it, qualify it, and it's ready to be deployed, it has to be relevant, it should be competitive, it should not be that there is IP available from very large companies already, which would be... So how do you suggest to young entrepreneurs as to how do they work with the larger companies to ensure that their IP is going to be relevant?
Yeah, I think there's no chat GPT there to get that answer directly. And then so hence it's a difficult exercise to go and check, right? For sure, I would say good thing is that because of the semiconductor ecosystem being so big, there are a lot of events that's happening, which is engineering events in India for semiconductor VLSI across the country, where we are discussing both the success stories of what we have solved, as well as some of the common problems that we are still facing. And I think that could at least become a one platform or a one point to get to hear about what are the issues and challenges that exist, and then go and finally figure out and deep down into saying, is this something maybe I can solve, or versus it's already there but not disclosed there. That's one. The second one is also a lot of corporates, including me or your previous company, we have started having a small incubation or startup support ecosystem where we pull in some of these people to ensure that we hear their ideas as well as seed in some of our challenges. It's more easy to do it in an academia environment where I kind of say is that, hey, I want to build this next generation analog circuit. Dr. Alex, what's your thought process on that? And so that's the second place where we can seed in through a corporate incubation, primarily maybe in an academia environment, to pick that up, do a proof of concept, and have a scaling opportunity with the bigger company that you're working with.
Thank you.
Can I just
Add on?
add to that
Yes.
a little bit? Because
Surely.
when I was listening to this, and I can speak from the experience of what SFO does. right? In the IP space, for example, an established company or a company that started off, you are actually becoming a factory to the world. You are actually building what they're giving as, this is my design, this is my spec. I just want you to print this for me, or build it for me, or assemble for me. So that's like the build to print kind of a model. So that's the labor end of the whole value chain, right? When you start moving up, you start becoming, you just give me specs, don't give me the print part. I will work out the final specs for you. So with that specification, now you're able to go one step higher in the value chain, and you're able to add a little bit more services around applying your design thinking and giving them the specs and giving them the final solution. So you go from, you advance to the build to spec part. Then we advance to saying that don't give all of this stuff, just give a vague concept. We will do the design for you. Then you migrate or you elevate yourself into ODM space. You become an original design manufacturer. Then you move into ODM plus. The problem here is, while we are doing this for decades, you have gained so much of knowledge and so much of capability that you can actually do this. But of course, you're also bound by IP infringement laws, so you need to be protecting yourself. So on one end, you start off as being the factory to the world, then you start moving to becoming a partner to them. So like you said, if NVIDIA or Apple or anybody, any big guy wants to work with you, they will just come and say, my next version of iPhone needs to have this. Just go get it done. And I want it by this date. And we have the capability to go and do everything from component sourcing, designing, testing, validating, putting it out on the line, giving them a product that works. So to me, that's the value chain. So in one sense, I see SFO doing this in pockets, but if you scale this out, then I think there's a tremendous opportunity. Because you have got to, and this is the part where all the knowledge you're gaining, you need to start turning this out into a far more of an output channel, which will give value.
Thank you, Prince. Dr. Alex, would you like to come in here in terms of, for the kind of talent and capability we need in order to do exactly what Naveen and Prince just said? How do you see the academia and the systems that we have coming along to do this?
So one thing I think most people don't understand, there is a reason why it is called hardware, right? Because it's hard. Right. It's not just physically hard, it's mentally hard. You cannot have something built on 6 months or a year. Impossible. The learning that is going into some of these areas. Like for example, I work on analog, mixed signal, RF. It takes at least 5 years for someone to get a grip of what it is, right? Let alone build something. So there is a lot of learning that goes in, and what is needed is not risk capital there. You need patience capital. You need a capital for the patience. Most investors or people who are trying to fund, that's the exact thing they don't have, right? So if you are looking at building a IP focused, R&D focused company, that is one thing that you need is give people space, time to actually build that. And universities are a very good place. If you look at Stanford, if you look at Berkeley, look at all those places, what they have invested is on the patience. And that created the capital, IPs which are around it. And when we talk about semiconductor, it's a whole lot of things. So it's not just building the foundries. Foundries is only one part, but what goes into foundry, whether it's instrumentation, whether it's software development, it's a whole lot of things that is there, which are secondary to it, which we also put within the larger umbrella of semiconductors.
So,
Thank you.
So I'll just so that I put some numbers on the complexity of hardware, it says that we are building something which is nanometer, 10 to the power -9 scale, so you are handling law of physics, but you're also building the models, which is 10 to the power 10, or you have millions and billions transistor in the chip, so you're building something which is 10 to the power 12, fitting into a smaller real estate, mapping it to reduce power from 500, 600 watts these days on GPU to something down, dollar cost from few cents, few dollars to all the way to the $40,000, right? Cycle time of 3 years to bring it down. And then hence the talent that we have been seeing a long back, decade back, a student coming out would have mostly only have a theory. And it took at least 4 years for me to have an active contribution to a project which got manufactured. And that's what we are pushing is that can the student from second year start doing a controller design, processor design, or circuit design, so that by the time they actually graduate, they have probably seen a manufactured product and have an understanding of everything from start to end and what it takes to do that.
Very, very interesting thought. Let's move on to the manufacturing bit a little bit more. And one of the topic for us itself is from assembly lines to intelligence hubs. When we talk manufacturing, I'm sure that a lot of people tend to associate it with assembly lines. But even in an assembly line, there is so much more to an assembly line than what just meets the eye. It seems like manufacturing means set up a few lines and you're putting in raw material on one end and you're getting something on the other. There's so much more that goes into it. I'll let you go into the detail. But I know I've been to SFO, the amount of different kinds of engineering activities that go into actually making that assembly line work is huge. So why don't you give us a little bit of that thing, and also onto how advanced manufacturing, AI, IoT, etc., coming into that as well.
Right. But I'm stuck on one thing which the gentleman was speaking about on the fab side. Whenever anybody mentions the word semicon, the first thing they think about, or the only thing they think about, is big fabs, right? And big fabs is where the wafers and the chips are made, and it's a huge capital-intensive process. And they all think that India can't do fabs. India isn't doing any fabs. We're not doing that. So the impression that you suddenly very quickly form, is that we are not in that space. But it's wrong. So if you look at the whole value chain, the fab part for a product is probably 10 to 20%, right? 80% is in the design, 80% is the integration, 80% is the other activities. And this is the play where India needs to focus, not on building fabs, is what I think. Personal opinion. Because why go in for 10 billion, 20 billion factories? You use 10 people in a room and say, you design the next generation of chips. And you get someone else to do it for you. Now, who's going to own the IP? And where's the value coming in from? So leave that aside. So coming back to SFO side, if you look at the kind of the way SFO has also evolved, you started with SMT lines. But then you realize that the customer needs more. When a board is going to come out, this board needs to go into another casing. It needs assembly. And the assembly needs to be made of plastic, or it needs tooling. So you suddenly think that, why don't we do that as well instead of outsourcing it? We'll tell the customer, we'll set up a plastics facility. We'll set up a high-precision tooling facility. We'll set up a sheet metal facility. So we can integrate everything. If you want to build a phone, we have the capability of assembling everything that goes into it in there, including the testing. So testing is another capability which we have now identified is quite unique. If a Foxconn wants to build a phone, they can't themselves test it. They need testers which is a bit more independent, and Apple needs to be convinced that this is going to work. So those are all areas where we have seen value adds coming in. Now the whole movement is towards, you got the hardware part of it is very true, but when you mix it with the software, when you mix it with a digitized environment, right now everybody is talking digital twin, looking at a conscious factory, a connected factory, a factory that makes decisions for itself on, I'm short of this material. If I have to meet that plant, place the order, get the material, have automated robots moving things in. So this is the kind of world we are trying to move into. When you move into that, suddenly you got ERP, MES, PLM, all sorts of other systems talking to each other, and you have a consolidated view of managing this entity. So which is where you're going to Industry 4.0++. And this is the kind of factory direction that we're also looking towards, and this is what we need to do. That is capital intensive, for no doubt. But if you're looking at what Jensen Heng he said recently, every company is going to become an AI factory. So manufacturing is not too far behind. I'm thinking that your manufacturing facility should become a platform. You don't build a factory to do only one or two things. It should be able to mold itself into doing multiple things. You can do any sort of products. And that's the kind of thinking we need to have, because there's no walking away from it. It is high capex, but what you're going to have to do with elements that you put in there should be flexibility.
And so what a message that we can give to the Kerala ecosystem also is, you don't need so many factories, but if you are building technology that goes into factories, and you build it from, say, one place, it gets deployed across the world. And the opportunity that you build up is not just on the production coming from the factory, but the technology going into the factory. Is that a a fair?
Absolutely, absolutely. That's our migration to the intelligence hub part, right? So what Kerala is good at, what India is largely good at is we got a lot of people. So if you got the largest amount of population in the world, you can fill all the factories with people. That's one thing. But Kerala, the outlook is different. We are supposed to have a lot of educated engineers available. So for them, you don't deploy them in factories. You deploy them into doing the other value-added parts. And that's where the opportunity is for Kerala.
So that actually brings segue, because I can look at the clock as well. We'll just come down for a final round. One of the messages I think from this panel that's coming out is that as a state, and since we are in Kerala, the high value created by the design ecosystem, by the engineering that goes into the manufacturing, are larger portions, a larger percentage of that 300 billion that we are talking about than pure products that comes out of a line, which means we should perhaps look at Kerala being like a California, and the rest of India is our China. And the value that is created can be got by getting into these kind of segments. The second thing I want to just leave with and take your final 30-second comments is in terms of what would be a kind of a rough split that we see. We spoke about how much of the value of this industry is where, so that we say that, and it's a guess number, how much in design, how much in manufacturing, and how much in all the ancillaries, if you were to take a rough guess. So you can skip it as well, but last 15 seconds from all three of you, what's the strategy for Kerala and where is the money?
Okay, I'll wrap this up. To me, I think maybe I shouldn't be saying this in public, but the margins are more in the intelligence part of the work, not in the factory part of the work, right? I think everybody knows how much that is, but here there's a lot of complexity that comes in, and you're able to do it in a different way. So if I were to get control of the company that I'm in, I would say put 80% of the focus here, because this is where the real difference that can be made, which can be more wider, better for our bottom line, but at the same time, it will elevate us to a different level, like Naveen was saying, who is doing the fab and who is doing the chip design IP, the NVIDIA versus the TSMC, you can see the difference. It's trillions versus billions.
Absolutely. I mean,
Yeah, I would say the 80% of the design or the products will drive the 20% of the manufacturing there. And then for Kerala, I would say that pick on the strengths. I see space I talked about. It's been very high on green and sustainability. That could be the other one. With the blue economy growing up, that could be the other one. So those could be the three starting points, but probably there is more that this audience can bring it up and add it up to the brilliant research ecosystem in our academia for the best colleges of the country here. I think that should be the path to go.
Yeah, I'd like to say one simple thing. Like I used to teach in some of the foreign universities, and in the integrated circuits course, it's usually say IC design course. So I asked the students, like, do you know what is the meaning of IC? People said integrated circuits. Then I said, so Indians and Chinese, because most of the class was full of Indians and Chinese. So, and if you look at that, large part of what we can make a difference, I think, is really looking at IP. We don't own a lot of IPs. As a Kerala, like I think, IP development, R&D, and those sort of high value advanced tech is what we can easily contribute. Because there is a lot of good people who are working for so many companies around the world. And if you look at, you'll find at least few people who are actually making leadership calls to doing that high level R&D from Kerala. And if we can get some of those people in and also build that ecosystem, starting, bringing that level of quality, that level of engagement that is needed, things will automatically change.
No, thank you. And I think we'll leave the panel with that note that we're really looking at how do we go global. And at Huddle Global, I think that's the call here, that there's a global electronics ecosystem out there, global opportunity out there that we can tag. I'm not sure whether we have time for any questions. Okay, so you can find us. We'll be here if you need to talk to any of us. So thank you all And all the best to the rest of Huddle Global.